Hey everybody, we're the Menschwarmers. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
You know, I'm sitting in my office. We're recording this. I am roughly in a pool of my own sweat.
It's getting a bit schwitzy outside.
We might be a desert people, but we do live in the diaspora, and therefore it's a little schwitzy.
It's not a dry heat for us.
No, it's not a dry heat for us. So, doing well. We got, it's summer. I woke up yesterday morning and it was summer. And as a man who likes to complain, this is my outlet.
Yeah. We have a bit of a different show today because we are joined the entire time by our good friend, Adrian Lee. Adrian, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here for this recording of our group chat. That's what we're doing here, right?
I
pretty much.
I want to start by mentioning or sort of adapting something that a famous Toronto Jew, man by the name of Gary Steingart, once wrote. Primarily that Jewish people and Asian people have three main things in common. The first one is a immigrant culture focused on education and performance. The second one is a ancestral homeland that is besieged by sectarian violence. And the third is cabbage.
Thought it was going to be intolerance for dairy on occasion.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
That's true, yeah.
Also, definitely not from Toronto, Gary Steingart. But
I was also going to say, I've learned something already from this.
I
believe is in a mixed Jewish and Asian marriage. So
he is. He was referring to his wife when he told that anecdote, and I continually confuse him with David Bezmosgis. But I guess we'll conclude literary corner of the Menschwarmers podcast here. And move on to the meat of the show.
So let's introduce Adrian a little bit. Adrian is an opinions editor at the Globe and Mail, and he has hosted his own podcast.
You know what they say about Jews? Three Jews, four opinions.
Yeah, that's true.
This is going to be great. I'm really going to enjoy this, I think.
Adrian is not what you would say is what you would call halachically Jewish, but he passes the vibe check.
Is Adrian our first non-Jewish guest?
Yes, he is our first non-Jewish guest,
Wow.
or at least
an incredible honor.
Yeah, non-fully Jewish guest.
Is it cool to say I'm philo-Semitic? Is that anything?
Yeah, exactly. You're like our Malcolm Gladwell.
No, something we should probably mention is that Adrian's wife is Jewish.
As I said, not halachically, but by marriage and other ways. Anyways, you are on today because we had the idea of talking about the funny coincidence that is that May is both Jewish Heritage Month and Asian Heritage Month. In Canada. In the States, it's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I think they threw Native Americans in too in the last couple of years, which is a little sad in terms of not getting the whole month to yourself.
Are Pacific Islanders, thinking about like your Salt Springs and your Victorias, are like well-to-do hippies?
Yeah, they don't get included in Canadian Heritage Month.
No. And Raffi and Randy Bachman.
The similarities between Jews and Asian Americans, Asian Canadians, in terms of sports and athleticism and the way we're perceived or think of ourselves. And it's something we want to sort of talk about and something we want to explore. I want to share an anecdote at the top, which is that Asian American and what is now Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month was first proposed by a Capitol Hill staffer who was disappointed that the bicentennial did not have enough mentions of the contributions of Asian Americans to American society. And that young woman's name, Jeannie Jew, Jew. Pretty amazing, pretty good coincidence. And now we have to share this month. There's been like Jewish celebrations at ballparks. I think there's been a few Asian American celebrations at baseball parks a little bit. So let's start there. What do you think about those sorts of celebrations? What does it mean to you? I guess I'll do the framing broadly. As a Chinese Canadian man, do you care about professional sports teams recognizing their Asian fans and Asian communities?
Well, I'll start by saying, does it matter to me that this is Asian American and Pacific Islander History Month? No, it should be said. I am not those things.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
But whatever. Asian Heritage Month. No, it couldn't matter less to me that stadiums recognize me. The only thing I want to be recognized at a stadium is getting on the Jumbotron, and it hasn't happened to me for 34 years. So if they're not doing that, then frankly, that's racist.
Would you be any more inclined to go to a Jays game if it was Asian Heritage Month? Sorry, Asian Heritage Day, and celebrated in what I can only imagine is I'm going to say a respectful but tacky way.
Yeah, I will admit this, which is that no, I would not go to, say, Asian Heritage Night at the Raptors game or whatever. I'm not out here doing that. My admission is that absolutely they sell a bunch of jerseys and stuff that have weird Asian designs during it. Sure. And I every time think about buying it. You know, your Raptor is the dragon, your Blue Jay is, I don't know. I don't think there's anything for Blue Jays, honestly. And maybe they should get there. City Connect.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Raptors have had a Chinese script jersey. I'm not sure. Certainly, like the Rockets have. They were very big on doing that, especially when Yao Ming was their center. And I assume some other teams have as well.
And that's ultimately the flaw in this whole thing is like, that's good for me. Like the reason I'm intrigued by getting a Raptors jersey that is has Chinese lettering, that is a dragon, is that it is more specifically Chinese. But like when we're talking about Asian Heritage Month, we're talking about a continent where there's 40 plus countries.
Sure.
You know, if I'm Filipino, what the hell am I buying why am I buying this for? You know, it's the difference between Chinese New Year and Lunar New Year. It can't possibly be things for everybody. So what is that heritage? I don't know. I when I think about what Asian heritage is, no idea what that could possibly mean.
Yeah, I've always thought that's a bit of a sort of funny idea of, I don't know, sort of feeding into what was in its origins a sort of racist sentiment in sort of lumping people in together in this way. I think because to a certain degree in Canada and the United States, Asian people from various ethnicities within one country, to get to that specific or more specific, as people from various different countries have been sort of lumped together and just said, you know, without a lot of reference to what their history or culture is or anything like that. Yeah. And this is just sort of repeating that by saying, like, you know, we're not really going to go to the difficulty of talking about every specific different culture, but, you know, here is your month and you ought to be proud of it. Yeah.
Shouts to the Kazakhs and shouts to the Uzbeks. You know, this month's for them, you know?
Yeah, I know. Asian Heritage Month has a very sort of narrow remit, I guess, in terms of really just, I suppose, being about East Asian people, however you want to define that. I suppose it's not. Like, in actuality, it's not. But I don't feel like a lot of, like, as you said, Tajiks or Kuwaiti people feel celebrated by this month. I don't think it is. I don't think it's attempting to do that.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, I'll be upfront about it. Realistically, you know, anytime a sports team is getting involved in Asian Heritage Month, it is ultimately a play for the Chinese dollar. And, you know, I
believe, Adrian, that's called the yuan.
Or the renminbi. Depends on
exactly. Wow. Yikes. Yeah, they're just chasing the Chinese market, and I guess to some degree that's fine. You brought up the Houston Rockets earlier. They have a long history of really, I would say, debasing themselves around the Yao Ming era and on. The way they really tried to make James Harden a thing in China, sure. Quite a desperate play. And so, yeah, you know, in that way, does Asian Heritage Month make me feel seen? Yes, because most of the time we're reflecting Chinese people.
Fair enough. I mean, I think there's something that gets a little interesting too, especially in regards to how the NBA has, I don't know, courted the Chinese market, China, the country market, not Chinese Americans, and has been sort of, I don't want to say bitten by that necessarily, but has run into the difficulties of, you know, Chinese censorship or
the geopolitical reality of such a move. The Raptors were at the center of such a firestorm. And Adrian, I wonder if you've considered this jersey. You know, when they played games in China, they changed their jerseys from red and white to like the red and gold of the Chinese flag. As sort of, and that jersey exists. It's out there. You know, you can get a Jose Calderon Raptors in China jersey.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if folks in this podcast cannot possibly understand this feeling, but I would say the nation there is not really reflective of me personally.
Sure.
Yeah, I never heard of that sentiment before. I wonder, so that leads me to the next question. If it isn't really about you, and I know to some degree, you know, we talk about it being lumped together, does that mean if you see a Japanese or a Korean Canadian athlete or a Japanese or Korean American athlete achieve some, success or familiarity as a, visibly Asian person, does that give you any sort of nice feelings other than if it was, say, a white athlete or a black athlete?
No, I would say, the last time I felt it was probably the last time any, an entire generation of Asians felt it, which was Linsanity.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Lin was not just extremely good, but he was doing it with incredible style. He was every Chinese mom's dream, which is that he went to Harvard and then got drafted by the Golden State Warriors. So he made his way to Silicon Valley, and then he made millions of dollars and became a champion. You can't write it better. But when he went on that run with the Knicks, for sure, I felt that. Wow, it's amazing that like a Chinese person is doing this. There also was at the time headlines like Knicks fail to find the chink in the armor.
Sure.
There were commentators that talked about Jeremy Lin's penis. It wasn't. It was good and it was bad. But when I see an Asian person in a professional sports team get called up, it doesn't like make me feel anything. Maybe that's my fault.
Well, I find that interesting because, and I want to dissect that a little bit, because Linsanity was really big because of that. I mean, it was, just a player on an incredible hot streak. It would have been amazing if it was anybody. But I think a lot of it was the sort of unexpected nature of it. That this kid who was, again, he was at Harvard. He wasn't at a big basketball school.
Yeah, and living with his brother. And,
or on Landry Field's couch.
That's just smart. That's smart for savings.
That's true. He was sort of going against the stereotype, going against the grain. And I think based on what I was reading at the time, a lot of Asians felt incredibly represented by him as like, both the way he was doing it. So is it that he was doing it with style, or he was doing it in that specific way? Have you not felt the same, the same sense of camaraderie or whatever you want to call it with other sort of Asian Canadian or Asian American sports figures in the last little while? Does it matter that he was Chinese as opposed to the sort of pan-Asian identity?
Yeah, I think it does matter that he was Chinese, though. Actually, let me just double check.
I believe he's Taiwanese.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. Let me just.
Okay, calling him Chinese is his own whole. It's his own whole kettle of fish.
This podcast has a one China policy. Actually,
I'm not so sure about that. I don't want a one state solution to anybody here.
The thing I think that really resonated for Jeremy Lin was that it wasn't that he just went on a tear. It was that he was, without question, the best player in the NBA at that time. He, the highlight I remember most, and this actually came after Linsanity, was when he eventually got traded to the Lakers, and he was playing with Kobe at the time. And it was toward the end of the game, and Jeremy Lin had the ball. Kobe was obviously calling for it because, why isn't Kobe taking the last shot? Jeremy Lin calls him off, and he takes the shot and he makes it. Mm-hmm. And it's that sort of, this isn't just he is excellent, but we are comparing ourselves to the absolute greats. I think that is resonant for me. And as a counterpoint, the best player in baseball is an Asian, and I have to say I don't really feel any kind of pride about that. I think if I was Japanese, I would feel different about it. I think a big part of that is just the culture that Japanese baseball comes from. Right. Is so fundamentally different from my experience as a Chinese Canadian.
Yeah, fair enough, and I understand the difference. I mean, I can understand also you probably don't look up to Shohei because you're not much into gambling, so you don't really identify with him in that way.
I don't identify with gambling, but I do love sending my friends to jail. So right. I was wondering,
Oh yeah, of course.
The whole premise of this podcast, and you certainly heard me and Gabe talk about it enough, is really just being interested in finding out who's Jewish. I guess that's I would imagine that's less of a going concern for you and some Chinese friends group chat. But you mentioned the other day you didn't know that Boba Fett was Chinese.
Question to you then. My question on that is, were you disappointed when you found out Cliff Lee was a normal white guy?
Yes, and shouts to my friend Cliff Lee, Globe and Mail letters editor, who is Chinese. That was very that time was very confusing for him as a baseball fan too.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have Mike Jacobs All Stars.
Yeah.
We can have Cliff Lee All Stars too.
I was gonna say that you found out recently that Bo Bichette is part Chinese. I think his mom's Peruvian Chinese or something like that.
So he's quarter Asian. Yeah,
he's a quarter Asian. That didn't elicit any feelings in you? I mean, Isaiah Kiner Falefa, I think is quarter Filipino or quarter something as well. I take it that doesn't cause any emotions for you or any feeling of pride.
No, I mean, at the time, I remember, and we have the receipts for this. I think at the time I went, and that was sort of it. And that's really all it is. Especially, I think when it comes to, and this is, I think, a big difference when we're talking about Jewish athletes versus Asian athletes, is we're splitting hairs when we're talking about halves and quarters, and when you're talking about Jewish athletes, they're Jewish. Like it's a straight up allegiance. It's a straight up identifier.
That's not entirely true.
Oh yeah.
We take sort of a Israeli national team policy, which is the one grandparent policy. If they have at least one grandparent who was fully Jewish, that would make them qualify. For example, we claim for the purposes of this podcast as Paul Goldschmidt, he had a Jewish father and Jewish grandparents. However, his favorite Jew is absolutely Jesus Christ and always will be. And he's not practicing. Artemi Panarin the same way. Like we count quarters, even halves, non-practicing, as long as there's a little bit of bloodline.
Right. The tribe does want to grow. That's sort of a pretty fundamental thing.
We're an insular people.
Right. Sure. But whereas Asians, we got too many, some would say.
Well, I wonder if that's part of what is driving your feelings about this, is that there is the sort of counter example of Asian dominance at international sporting competitions. Like China's won the most medals at the Olympics more often than not in the last many years. It's hosted several Olympics, and even in winter sports that it hasn't traditionally been strong in, it's become pretty dominant in many of them as well, just through funding and identifying people and
population size.
Yeah, I was gonna say population size, and also like the ability to pull promising 5-year-olds out of school and take them to what in any other context would be considered a sort of state slavery to become the world's best short track speed skater or something like that.
I can't date women right now because I'm too busy calling myself a piece of shit.
I had a dysfunctional Jewish mother and I had a dysfunctional Native mother.
I had 25 full years of utter struggle and failure.
I started to realize the absurdity of my inability to let go of this monster of guilt.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Hi, I'm Ralph Benrig. I'm the host of Not That Kind of Rabbi, where we look at people's spiritual journeys and take a little time for their self-reflection, and maybe yours. You can get it all at thecjn.ca/NTKR or wherever you get your podcasts.
I want to get back to the Pan-Asian thing for a moment, seeing that we're in, Asian American Heritage Month, or AAPI, or American Asian Heritage Month. We sort of had a fresh, exciting Asian athlete moment this past weekend in the PGA Championship going into the final day. The final group was 3 American-born men of Asian heritage. We had Xander Schauffele, who's Taiwanese, Colin Morikawa, who's Japanese, and Sahith Theegala, who's Indian.
There was golf this weekend. No one told me this.
Yeah, and from my last research, I think that's the first time the top 3 going into a Friday has all been visible minorities, and also Asian American. So it's a very, very interesting situation. The last, I guess, Asian duo in golf I could think of is Tiger Woods and Y.E. Yang, 2 Asian Americans fighting it out on the last day, or Asian Americans.
Vijay Singh, I guess, as well.
Vijay, well, he's Fijian.
Yeah, but he's of Indian descent.
Yes.
No, anyways, you bring up Tiger. Sorry, do you want me to interrupt?
Yeah, please.
No, go ahead. I wanted to talk about Tiger because I feel like he is often or more frequently claimed by the Black community than the it's a Asian American community. His mom was Thai. And based on what I've read or the things he said, like he certainly seems pretty connected with his Thai lineage. I don't know if he's a practicing Buddhist, but he certainly incorporated elements of Buddhism within his life.
And he calls himself Asian.
Yeah.
He says, I'm a black and Asian man.
Obviously, it's unfair to make you speak on behalf of all Asians, but we're going to do it.
No, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Because you're here on this podcast.
We speak for all Jews every week.
We're like the Lorax, but, our trees are Jews. Anyway, so what was it like having Tiger as a kid growing up? Was he someone who was idolized by an Asian American community?
I think that there were efforts to, but I do think, to your point, the famous Chappelle Show racial draft, Asians didn't get him. We did get the Wu-Tang Clan. So,
I was about to say, so do you think the Wu-Tang Clan, is he your Tiger? Are they your Tiger Woods?
Yeah. Method Man, less RZA. But this is I think is part of the problem, is that we're really talking about cultural perception, right? Tiger did almost everything he could do to be a black and Asian person. As you said, sure. He made clear his identity was not just black, but he was also Asian. And I just don't think that in the popular imagination that really stuck. I mean, part of that is because I think Earl Woods was black, and Earl Woods was such a formative figure. People don't talk about Cultita Woods, but he does talk about her a lot as this kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, like a Tiger mom. She was this enforcer who was like very, very tough. That's what he called her, an enforcer. And all those things, the success, the achievements, that piece, that all resonates with the cultural understanding of being Asian. But those are, I think, cultural aspects that, especially if you're Asian in the diaspora, you may not feel particularly seen by.
I think there is a similarity with Judaism that sports is not necessarily the goal, or at least not the only goal for parents and for their progeny. Tiger moms, the reputation of Tiger moms, and the idea of, I guess it was written by an Asian American woman, the book of, how to raise your kids for the Ivy League, basically, or to be incredibly successful people. It wasn't so that they go to, get scholarships to go play football at Alabama. It was so that they get scholarships to go study medicine at
I was going to say, they get scholarships to go play football at Michigan or
somewhere
study at Harvard. It reminds me, there's an episode of Fresh Off the Boat where the kids are taking golf lessons, and they're at an Asian club in California, in LA where they live. And there's a older Asian woman that all of the other moms think is Mrs. Woods. But is actually just an older Asian woman who likes to pretend she's Tiger Woods' mom, and likes to hang out and give advice. I think that reflects your point of, as you said, Adrian, Asian people looking for a icon that the culture didn't necessarily provide.
Yeah. What I will speak to a little bit here, though, is, when you asked me to come on, you wanted me to talk about sort of the Asian athlete cliches as it relates, sure. to the Jewish Jewish.
I've noticed a lot
cliches.
of them, a lot of both Jewish and Asian athletes who reach the pros tend to have gone to like your Stanfords, your Yales, your Harvards.
Right. And ultimately that's, I think, in many ways something that a lot of certainly Asian American athletes have talked about. And I think just as like a sports fan who does recreational sports, you're aware of, which is again, it's the model minority myth, right? There is this belief that that sports is not the thing that an Asian is going to go for. Right. Sports is a distraction from getting high marks. It is a distraction from getting your high paying job in a reliable field like medicine and law. And it's just not seen as that being part of your identity in the way that it feels like that is entirely the case for almost every other race. And so you do see this myth play out, and it plays out in, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but in professional sports, it is sub 1% certainly in the NFL and in the NFL and the NHL, it is sub 1% in
sure.
terms of Asian population. So those things do have impact. If you're a college player and you go to one of these elite schools, which it should also be said, like the pro leagues don't tend to draft from. You're already in some ways at a disadvantage. There is this sense that you're kind of in it for the wrong reasons.
Sure.
And that parlays directly into the kinds of players that get into the majors.
Yeah, I think that perception probably plays the most in the NFL as much as anything, because there's been so much talk about guys being rejected for being too smart. I can certainly imagine Asian players being rejected for I don't know, a racist conception of, well, this guy's not in it for the right or not gonna turn out the right way, or we don't have the example of this person, this type of person succeeding in this way.
Though I do want to say the NFL has I was looking into this, has a weirdly disproportionately high number of Koreans among Asian Americans. Okay. Young Ho Koo is probably the you can make an argument, maybe the greatest Asian
he's been in the league
NFL
now
player.
Probably 5-6 years as a kicker. Yeah.
Hines Ward, half Korean.
Although I think of Jamaican Chinese, won 3 Super Bowls, Patrick Chung.
Right.
Yeah.
Although,
and obviously there's a huge number of Pacific Islanders as well.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's interesting how the stereotypes are very similar among both cultures. I remember there was a Tim Hortons commercial when we were kids about a Asian kid growing up in Canada, and he was playing hockey, but he was constantly being told to go do his homework. But secretly, all along, his dad was watching him and supporting him from the shadows. And I think that's the stereotype for Jews as well, of just the, okay, you can play some baseball on the side, but really, you should go be a doctor or something like that.
On a previous episode, we talked to Ryan Lavarnway about his parents' relief that he decided to go play baseball at Yale instead of any other university.
And I'm sure Jeremy Lin's parents were pretty excited for him to go to Harvard. That it's funny to think of him nurturing an MBA career on the side of having to achieve academically, which I think he did.
One other thing about Ivy League schools is there are no athletic scholarships. You got to keep up your grades, or they will kick you out.
Yeah. If anything, it's actually a great thing that you get elite athletes. You do get legitimately elite athletes that come from the Ivies. I mean, hold on, I have this note here. I mean, Michelle Kwan is the most decorated U.S. figure skater of all time. She is the ambassador to Belize now.
Wow.
She came out of an Ivy.
Good gig.
Yeah, it's a great gig when you can get it. I have a question for you guys, though. Not to
ambassador to Paradise, where the biggest diplomatic issue is an American got drunk and we had to take him
and famously very little ice.
Yeah, I was about to say not a lot of ice, but I bet she's into surfing now or something you can do in Belize. Yeah. She just hangs out.
Can I ask you guys a question, which is, when I see a high profile Asian athlete for my team, I get nervous. Most famously, this was Munenori Kawasaki. I think we should talk about Kawasaki. Sure. Yeah. So this is a Japanese shortstop who played for the Jays 2014, I think.
2014, 2015, around then. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on some of those playoff teams, and he became a huge hit with fans, and that's great, and rightly so. He didn't really get any playing time per se, but he was a great interview.
Sure.
Most crucially, he didn't have a translator. He chose not to have a translator, and so he just went for it.
I mean, he was also a player coach, which you don't see very often. He was on the bench and would coach first base.
I think maybe unofficially. I think that was just a fun thing he maybe did, but
maybe.
But the Kawasaki stuff, as a Jays fan, it honestly just put me on alert a little bit, just because the people who bought Kawasaki jerseys were not Asians. The people who were, when Kawasaki was coming up to bat and bowing, were not Asians. The interviews that he gave, people loved those interviews, and there is a genuine humor to him. He is an objectively funny guy, but I think what people are laughing at is the accent.
Just to give some context, he is doing them in a very accented English that is the English that he was capable of speaking at the time, and he was very rowdy, talking about the parties that they were having in a very excited way. The team was winning. I agree. It was always a little bit of okay, he's in on the joke a little bit, but how in on the joke is he? And for the people who are buying into that joke, are they buying into it because it is a funny racist caricature in their mind or not? That's the ultimate question, I think, for a lot of these things. It's the reason Dave Chappelle stopped making his TV show, right?
Yeah, I would go even further. I always found it odd when Munenori Kawasaki was on TV. Whenever he would come to bat, especially if it was a big moment, the camera would just find Asian people in the crowd and sort of cycle between Asian fans looking nervous.
Exactly. I mean, the famous example of this to me was in, I think it was the early 2000s when the Yankees had Hideki Irabu. This was a Japanese pitcher who was a very high, maybe at the time, you know, second to Hideo Nomo, the second most prominent Japanese pitcher to come into Major League Baseball, and he was not good. And if you're not good as a Yankee, that is a tough go. Yankee fans will give you hell. But famously, George Steinbrenner, the owner, did call him a fat toad, and that stuck with him forever. He went on to kill himself in 2011. You know, these are. It's always great to see yourself represented, but I think because there's so few, there is this nerve issue for, like, there's this alert to me, and I wonder to what degree do you guys feel that when there's a.
I mean, this is gonna sound like, I would say, a little hoity-toity, but for some reason I expect Jewish athletes to be, as we talked about earlier, like educated and reasonable. Like when so-and-so athlete, I'm not going to mention any names, but like posts about how proud they are to be unvaccinated, I get like a little cringy if they're outwardly Jewish. And like that's happened before. We've talked about a particular athlete like that on the show before.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I guess to answer your question, Adrian,
like
Adrian,
you want them to
you
represent
asked,
the community well, not necessarily get the right fans. At least that's my experience with it.
Yeah, and I guess, like, you know, we're so happy to just have made it a lot of the time that it's like I don't worry about falling on our face. And even like, let's say, for example, like the Israel baseball team at the last World Baseball Classic, like they got perfect game. Like they did not have a great showing by all accounts. Like they did win a game, but like it wasn't a great showing. But like, yeah, just making it to the World Baseball Classic for a team that you know, is pretty scrappy and upstart, or was that not that long ago, like is pretty impressive. And I certainly don't feel like, oh no, we're embarrassing ourselves out there. It's sort of like, it's great to see us do it. And the ultimately, I think, to answer the question, the representation counts and is more important than any detriment.
It's always good to have more, right? But, you know, I do, you know, maybe it says something more about me than anything else that my concern is perhaps the public perception of it. But, you know, even
I think it's something that's on the look. I think it's on the mind of everybody. Probably for Jews, very incredibly highly concerned about those sorts of things right now. But it's always on the minds of people who grow up visibly different or definably different one way or another. Of, you know, how are we being seen, and are we being represented by the best of us, or you know, you're not always going to be, and how does that reflect on you?
That's the thing the community. That's the thing that Jewish athletes and Asian athletes will have in common. That and like knowing where the good Chinese restaurants are.
Sure.
I think
see you at New Ho King.
I've talked about this many times. I think that there's a special bond, you know, going back to the Gary Steingart thing, that Chinese people and Jewish people have in each other's food. There's certainly Chinese restaurants that a lot of Jews hang out at. R.I.P. Lee Garden, shout out. And there's obviously, you know, I find a disproportionate number of Asian people in your average Jewish deli in a modern world. I think that's sort of a nice cultural context we have for each other. You know, as we're going through this, one thing I wanted to mention before we get to Adrian, your ideal list, I found I've been putting together a list of Chinese and Jewish athletes who are both, that I'm curious to get your opinions on. The first, unfortunate the way his career turned out, but Josh Ho Sang really represented a lot of different communities at once. He was Chinese, he was Jewish, and he was black. And I think a lot of people were wishing for his success. Second, I want to point out Princeton Tigers soccer star, Ella Gantman. She is the goalie for Princeton, who won the Ivy League in one of her tournaments there. So good for Ella.
Sure.
I'll say that. And then lastly, former Edmonton Oiler and Maple Leaf goalie Peter Ng, who really, you know, Adrian is a goalie. He is Chinese. And Peter Ng is also a goalie and Chinese, but also Jewish. So we can call this episode the Peter Ng. He's not dead, but the Peter Ng Memorial Hour.
Petering all-stars, maybe.
Yeah, start a petering all-star team.
Those will have to be players who are either Jewish or Chinese, or could be confused for,
or it's like multiple.
Yeah, or multiple. Yeah,
Yeah.
Or could be confused for all of them.
We did want to ask you. There's a question we ask everybody about their favorite Jewish athlete. Adrian, who are your favorite Chinese athletes of all time?
Oh, Chinese athletes. That's
or Asian.
Not what I
We can go Asian.
Okay.
Wait, no, Adrian, who's your favorite Jewish athlete of all time?
Oh yeah, it's a great question.
I mean, like, the easy answer is Sandy Koufax.
Everyone
right?
says Sandy.
Everyone
Koufax.
Yeah, like I don't know.
You are
you
an Oilers fan. I would think that you would pick Hyman.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like choosing current players for any greatest of conversation, but we are recording this the day after the Oilers did win. It's great to see someone who famously, Zach Hyman, doesn't work very hard, is what I've been led to believe. So it's nice to see him succeed despite that.
It's because his family was wealthy. That's why.
Yeah, that's what it was. Right. Yes, totally. It was that. Honestly, so the like two iconic Asian athletes to me. These are like two people whose, if there were jerseys, I'm in there. The first one is representation not just of Asians, but it's representation of big fat guys. Is Daeho Lee.
Sure.
He had one season with the Mariners. Mm-hmm. He was an icon of the Korean baseball organization, and he's Daniel Vogelbach except Korean, and love that, you know.
And did his jersey say Lee on the back?
His jersey did say Lee. Yes.
There you
What's
go.
his last name? So.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's Lee Daeho. Sometimes, in that case, Lee is still the last name. But anyway, whatever. Okay.
And then the other one is my other favorite Asian athlete is Nihar Janga. You guys may remember him from winning the Scripps Spelling Bee. Des Bryant.
Iconic celebration.
Iconic stuff. And
right.
He truly is the athlete of our time, the Asian athlete of our moment, and we should never forget his name.
What a good way to end the podcast and celebrate Asian Heritage Month with a shout out to Nihar. Yeah.
Apparently, looking at it now, I quickly Googled him, see what he's up to now. It seems that he is in the world politics program at Stanford. So good for Nihar.
There you go.
There you go.
An athlete who will make their mother proud.
Well, thanks again to our guest, Adrian Lee. A very interesting chat and a little bit of a different podcast than we usually do. We'll be back soon to wrap up the NHL and NBA playoffs, talk about the Jews remaining there, talk about other ongoing things in Jewish sports as we head into the doldrums of summer. As always, we're put out by the Canadian Jewish News. You can find our podcast at thecjn.ca and follow us on Twitter at Menschwarmers. See you next time.